Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Harvey Oberfeld, retired but still heavily engaged TV reporter. Welcome to the show, Harvey.
Good morning.
Who has caught your eye the most in the federal election so far?
Well, you know, the problem I have, and I always had this when I was working, and I still have it now, I'm in favor of whoever I listen to last. Sort of, you know, I think all the candidates, from my point of view, there's none of them that are absolutely radical, and I'd say, other than the Bloc Québécois, I suppose. But, you know, most of them, they make some very good points. I like them, what they say. They're zeroing in on different issues, and that's why you can believe one on one issue and then support the other one on the other issue, and then the third on the third issue. For example, I have to admit, I kind of like Harper's strong presentation on the NICAB and also on maintaining our security with regard to refugees coming into the country and who they are and all that kind of thing. You know, I think the economy is not really doing that poorly looking at the global world. But on the other side, I've written terribly critical stories or blogs about Harper. You know, he is a dictator. He silenced the bureaucrats. He doesn't take questions from reporters. Even now on the campaign, it's really controlled and limited. You know, he's done all kinds of cuts. I don't like his stance on the environment. So there's a lot, and the scandals. How can you forget that? And then there was that anti-union bill that they rammed through Parliament just before the election call. So there's all kinds of things I don't like him about. And then there's Trudeau. You know, Trudeau, I like the idea of infrastructure improvement. You know, anybody who travels in Europe or other parts of even in the States, parts of the States, the roads, the bridges, the public transit, public transportation is so much better, especially in Europe, than here. Now, I know there's a density and there's a population factor, but even in our major corridors, we don't have, you know, we are really falling down as far as public transit and our infrastructure replacements and construction. And what better time to do it than when the interest rates are so low? It would generate jobs. It would create jobs, which of course then everybody working pays taxes. So I agree with that. And then there's Mulcair. Mulcair, you know, I like what he says about helping the middle class or the poor a little more, and you know, doing things for the ordinary people. I like his, you know, daycare. I know a lot of people have a lot of problems. You know, there's no reason to work if daycare is going to eat up everything that it costs you when you go out to work. I like a stronger stance on the environment. So there's something in it that I like about everything they say. But you know, I'm at the point now where I'm starting to try to figure out who to eliminate. And to be honest, I think the one I've eliminated, my own personal mind, is Mulcair, the NDP. I don't like his stance on, I don't like his stance on the NICAB. I don't like especially his call for the repeal of the Clarity Act, which requires, at this point, a substantial indication from Quebec voters in any clear question if they want to secede and separate from Canada. And Mulcair said, I don't know why he even said it. Nobody asked him to. It's not an issue in Quebec until he brought it up, that he would return to 50% plus one. And I just totally reject that, because I know how the separatists fuzz the questions, and you know, I know how that works, and they did it last time, and they almost won. And I think it's a bit hypocritical, from my point of view, of the NDP to say that 50 plus one, you know, is good enough to break up the country, because that's what democracy is, 50 plus one. You know, the majority should rule. But in their own constitution, they require two-thirds majority for any constitutional changes to the NDP's own constitution. And that wouldn't be from a disparate group of politically, ideologically different people. That's from within their own party, where they'd all be NDPers. They require two-thirds. So clearly it's easier, in Mulcair's view, to break up the country than to change the NDP constitution. And that really bothers me, so I'm probably, being honest, I would not, I'm leaning towards, I would not vote NDP for Mulcair. I think he's also too Quebec centrist. I mean, there's all kinds of things. But I still like some of the things he says. But right now, for me, it's between the Conservatives and the Liberals. You know, in my mind, although I did write I wouldn't vote for Harper some months ago because of these scandals and various things. But the reality is coming down, and I'm looking at both of them.
All these ads attacking Trudeau for being too young and inexperienced. He's only 1 year younger than Harper was when he became Prime Minister.
Yes, well, you know, I've gone back and forth on that, because even before the election was called, you know, I'm sort of an equal opportunity criticizer. I wrote about Trudeau a year ago that he really was young and shallow, not so much because of his age, but I just thought he was. I mean, what had he actually done in life that would, you know, that would authenticate him as a potential leader of the country and run it to what is it, $2 trillion budget or something, and lead the country? I mean, I just couldn't imagine. I mean, what had he done? What had he accomplished? I thought he was kind of shallow, you know. So I criticized him very, very heavily. And I kind of agreed with the Conservatives, you know, not ready. And then when he started campaigning and he started speaking, I was quite impressed. I thought he handled, I thought he spoke well. I thought what I like about him is he takes questions. He'll take lots of questions, unlike Harper, who it's very carefully controlled. I mean, it's really awful the way, even in an election campaign, there are 5 questions. You know, 1 or 2 from French media, from Ottawa, the Central Canada media, the national media, and then there's 1 or 2 from, or 3, depending if the French get 1 or 2 in the first one, if they're in Quebec. It's very complicated, but basically there's 4 questions from national media, 2 in English, 2 in French, or 3 in English, 1 in French, and then he chooses a local reporter, and usually, from what I've seen, he chooses a very safe local reporter who's not going to ask anything Harvey Oberfeld would have ever asked. So, and that's it. And then they don't take any more questions. I just can't stand that from a politician, even when they're in office, let alone when they are, you know, on a campaign trail. It just seems ridiculous. Now, so Trudeau, I was sort of leaning that way, but then I watched the day they had the foreign affairs debate. I happened to watch the UN in the morning, and I was trying to picture Trudeau speaking to that group, and I think he would have looked like a joke. I think he would, you know, the way he speaks too, he gets emotional. He gets, you know, I just don't think he has the credibility that would place Canada very high up on a world stage level. Now, we're not exactly at the top as it is, but I could not see him handling world issues. I don't like his stance on terrorism. If somebody is a convicted terrorist and they've come from overseas and we've welcomed them into our country, and the guy commits terror against us, while, you know, here is a new immigrant, even if he has his citizenship taken out, I would agree with Harper that he doesn't deserve to stay in this country, and afterwards serving his sentence, I would revoke his citizenship and throw him out. You know, Trudeau is defending this, that you're a citizen, you know, you're a Canadian when you're a Canadian, which raises in my mind the issue that other people have raised. Well, what about war criminals? You know, we've taken away the Canadian citizenship of war criminals and sent them home. Well, does that mean once they became a Canadian, we wouldn't do that anymore because now they're one of ours and therefore, you know, the past is forgiven? Absolutely not, in my view. I would throw them all out. So I don't like Trudeau on that. I think that's where his immaturity came forward in the last debate. So that's why I'm sort of wavering and waffling on making my decision. I think this is one of the most difficult elections for me to decide, and I'm not there yet.
We'll have more with Harvey Oberfeld right after the break.
More and more people are looking to the internet for intelligent, riveting, and thought-provoking interviews. To advertise on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com, call 604-699-8600, 604-699-8600.
In Goddard we trust.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Harvey Oberfeld. Harvey, you're saying you're finding it very hard to decide who to vote for, and you're a very experienced political person who's covered various and sullied and celebrated prime ministers. How do you think it is for the average citizen trying to pick out stuff?
I think it's easier. Because I talk to friends of mine, people who don't work in the media, don't work in politics, and they're out in the real world, and they've all decided they pretty well have it done. Because the problem with me, or people like me, is first of all, I'm not partisan. I have voted for every single federal major party other than the Separatists, but over my lifetime I have voted for every party, every single party nationally. So it's not that difficult. I mean, it's not like I'm partisan saying right from the beginning, well, I know who I'm voting for, right or wrong, whatever they say, whatever they do, I'm with them. I've never been that kind of person. I couldn't have worked in the business as long as I did, and I hope as fairly as I did, without feeling that. I was just, my attitude when I was working was I was against whoever was in power at the time. I try to not report against them, but I certainly try to hold their feet to the fire, and realizing all the billions of dollars we were giving them of our money to manage, I wasn't going to just go for the press release sort of thing about, oh, we're doing a great job, especially when I knew things behind the scenes were not so well. I mean, I was kind of tough, I guess, on all of them, and I've never regretted that. But friends of mine who don't follow politics that much, they've decided they like this promise, they like that promise, something usually that actually relates to them, whether it's child care, how good that would be, although it certainly wouldn't be in all at once. Various things, tax cuts, tax breaks from different age groups, doubling the tax-free savings account, people like that if they're older. So I've seen that other people want to see more into transit. I've got friends of mine who dyed-in-the-wool NDPers, and it's all easy for them. It's all automatic. But if you follow politics a lot, if you actually pay attention, if you watch it, I've watched every debate. I watch the Canadian debates. I watch the American debates. I just love that stuff. And as I said earlier, with me, I find that I'm in favor of whoever's last speech I listen to last. I think they made very, very good points. And then I hear the other side of it, coming from the other side, and I say, oh, I forgot. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, no. So it's difficult when you follow it completely as much as you can, and you spend a lot of time reading about it, and you look at their speeches, and you look at their platforms, and it's much more difficult because they all offer something you like, and they all offer something you don't like. So that's where the problem in making the decision. It's kind of like who's going to be the best or who's going to be the least evil of all of them.
Americans are jealous of Canadians, I've heard from friends and relatives, because we have more than just two choices.
Well, that's a problem in the United States. They did try a third party at one point, and it didn't work. Their system is set up. I mean, when you actually register, you have to register as a Democrat or Republican. I don't, and people take that quite seriously. And once they're registered, they almost feel that that's what they have to do. Unless they could not register and be an independent. That's possible too. But it's much more polarized down there, and the divisions there don't take place outside the parties, they take place inside the parties. For example, the Republican Party in the United States, you have the old traditional wing, and then you have the further right wing. And, I don't think anybody from the Eisenhower era, from the old Republican side would actually recognize the far right wing of the Republican Party now. I think they would just. It's so different, and it's a problem. Look at people being fascinated by Ted Cruz or Donald Trump. And they get good ratings. They get, they're very popular in the polls. And I think that is something that takes place within the party there, and they're struggling with it much more than we do. Our parties aren't as radical inside as they are down in the States.
Well, if you register Republican or Democrat, that means you get to vote on the leadership.
That's right. You can take part in the primaries and all that kind of thing. And it's just a different system the way it is set up. Just take a look at the governing system. It boggles the mind, and we see over the last 8 years, certainly how this has affected them. You can have a Democratic president, but a Republican-controlled Congress or Senate or House or whatever. Of course, they're at odds with each other. That's why the U.S. Congress has pretty well been handcuffed for the last 8 years, doing anything really meaningful on any major topic. They've been more at each other's throats and opposing, in opposition to each other. In the Canadian, I like the British parliamentary system myself, because you can have a multiplicity of parties or interests, and also if you're going to be prime minister, at least you lead a government that can actually do things. Now, of course, if you have a minority government, you're somewhat constrained, more so than in a majority government, but you do have the ability to act. And maybe if you have a minority government, maybe you're kind of more moderate than you might be if you were in a majority. That does affect it. But then you have the smaller parties also that can have some influence, especially with a minority vote. The challenge is to have a system where you don't have what you have, let's say, in Italy or in Israel or something, where you can have like 25 parties. And no one governs except by coalition, and then of course it all falls apart, and that's also very, very difficult. The only thing I would like to see changed in the Canadian system would be some sort of proportionality. The way our system is set up, as you know, a party can literally run third in every single, or second, in every single seat, and not have a single representative in the legislature or in the parliament. And I think there's something wrong with that, because then you have millions of voters who voted other than for the party in power, but it actually is possible that you'd end up as we did here with in BC, when we had 2 NDPers elected, when the Liberals, Socrates, took over, the Liberals took over the legislature. And I think I don't like that system. I think there should be some sort of way of calculating proportionality, maybe some combination of voting by riding and then some sort of additional seats by proportionality. I think that would be the best way to go, but we're a long way from doing that, because it was tried in BC, and it failed the necessary. And again, that was one of those where it required more than 50+1, and it failed. It came very close, but it failed. And I believe we should look at a system like that again, federally and provincially.
Well, Harper got a majority government, even though 61% of Canadians who voted against him.
Well, that's the problem of the system. That's one of the way, when you have first past the post, that's the way the system works. I do have a problem with that. I think there has to be a combination of both, first past the post and proportionality. But there's have to be more leading minds than I to political scientists to take up that cause and that case. But certainly the current system is not ideal.
Well, Switzerland does have that combination of you elect somebody for your riding, and then seats are awarded depending on how many votes you got overall.
Well, that's exactly what I'm talking about. That kind of a system would be something that should be looked at. And it's different when you have provinces versus cantons, It's a slightly different size and the demographic and even the population makeup is different. So it does require something but it could be done. I've written before on the blog that I like minority governments. I think under our current setup, when government has a majority, we really have a dictatorship for 4 or 5 years. And they don't have to listen to anybody. And in the case of Harper, they certainly doesn't seem to listen to anybody. That's one of the problems, I think, with the current situation. When you have a majority government, there's little modification in anything put forward. They go through the process, but in the end, unless it's very rare times when they'll have a free vote, very little gets changed. A little bit tinkering maybe in committee on something, but not that much. I think in a minority government, it does two things. It does force the government in power to moderate what it might put before the Parliament, because it knows it needs the support of at least some people from the other parties to get it through. So I think it takes away from them, it does moderate the legislation they put forward, plus it places the opposition parties in more effectively being able to contribute to the debate and to the legislation and maybe introduce something that would change it slightly or amend it. I think my own view is that our best governments have been minority governments, and when any party gets a majority, I think Canadians end up being more divided. Parliament becomes more strident, and I don't think we get the best governing out of that kind of a system. So in this case, I'd be very happy with a minority, and I could be very happy, I think, with a conservative minority or a liberal minority. I think I'd be, what I'd worry about would be if Harper got slightly more seats than the Liberals and the NDP, and the NDP and the Liberals decided to form a coalition and go to the Governor-General and say, well, we've got together enough seats to make a government. That would bother me. I think the party that has the most seats should have the opportunity to form a government, even if it's a minority government.
Harvey, what about the Senate? Mulcair wants to get rid of it. The other two, I don't think, have said much about it.
Well, actually, Trudeau has said it should be reformed, and Harper. Harper has said he'd be happy to see it abolished, but I don't really think he really believes that. I think that's another reason I personally reject Mulcair myself, because I don't believe the Senate should be abolished. I think the Senate, as flawed as it is and the way it is set up, I would love to see, Triple E. I would favor, an elected Senate and representing the regions, and that could be done if the will were there to do it. But of course, the will isn't there to do it, because a lot of the provinces, especially Quebec, who now benefit tremendously under the current setup, they're not going to change, and especially to give equality to other provinces. I mean, why would they want to do that? But so I don't think we'll ever get a Triple E. But I think we could have elections for Senate, and I think that would be I think that would be a good way to go. So we have elected representatives. But I do believe the Senate does perform important functions, such as especially if it were elected, the actual review of legislation. And there are a couple of cases where the West has actually been saved from absolute discrimination by the East in the Senate, and I've written about them also. There was the case where an NDP private member, this was during the minority government of Harper, an NDP private member from New Brunswick introduced a motion calling for the entire, every single Supreme Court judge appointed would have to be bilingual enough to understand Supreme Court arguments in both languages. And I mean, that's not just ordering a coffee or a hot dog. This is legal arguments at the Supreme Court level. And of course, because the Bloc Québécois at the time, the NDP and the Liberals in opposition supported it, it actually passed the Commons. And what that legislation would have meant for BC and Alberta and Western Canada, it would have severely restricted anybody who could be appointed to the Supreme Court from those areas. And it's much easier in Quebec or New Brunswick or even parts of Manitoba, but in the West, it would have made anybody being appointed, it would really almost cut the list to a handful of people or a dozen, so it really hit at the West, and nobody stood up for the West other than the Conservatives in the Commons. And the Liberals sold us out, the NDP sold us out, well, the Bloc Québécois, of course, so the Senate, it went before the Senate, and the Senate refused to pass it. So the West was actually saved by the Senate on that deal. There have been a few of those things, that have come up, where the Senate has actually done its job and done its job well. Unfortunately, the scandals have been awful, and the Senate is a waste of money in some ways, the way it performs and the way the way it functions. But then it needs reform. It doesn't need to be abolished, and so I don't certainly want to see the Senate abolished, and that also affects my vote when Mulcair says he wants it abolished. That sort of made me think, I don't agree with that. And I think Trudeau has called for it to be reformed, and I think Harper, sees it as a nuisance, but as we've seen, his policies on the Senate can change, so I don't really think he's not adamant about getting it abolished.
Harvey, thanks a lot for chatting with us.
You're welcome.
My guest has been Harvey Oberfeld, his blog, keepingitreal.ca. You're listening to the Goddard Report on TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Find us on Twitter at TalkDigitalNet. Our popular YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Comments about the show can be emailed to info@howstreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of How Street Media Incorporated.